Set sail in a general that way direction.
Okay, so in this video we will be creating a really cool map animation that was inspired by Maple. I don't know if I mispronounced the name, so let me know in the comments if you see this video. So that is what this video is about. A cool 3D map animation tutorial in DaVinci Resolve Fusion. So the first couple of things that you will need is, first of all, your elements. Here I have a bunch of elements that I got from, in this case I got them from Raw Pixel, but you can probably find some assets on Pixabay or whatever platform you use to find assets. One important thing here that you have to know is that if your assets come with a background and stuff like that, it's ideal that you remove the background either in Photoshop or any other software, or use the magic mask and then export them as PNGs. That way it's going to be a little bit easier, and it's probably going to make it easier for your system to work with these elements. So we're going to bring a fusion composition into our timeline right here. I'm going to change the color and I'm going to set the duration to be around 9 seconds, like in the other one. I could have just copied this one, but we're just gonna do these. Okay, I'm gonna open that fusion composition and I'm gonna press, well, on the first thing you always want to do is add a background, which is gonna be our canvas. I'm gonna set this to be one screen for now, but we can work with 2 screens later on as well. Okay, so the first thing that we're gonna use is the map. So we're gonna bring this map right here and I'm gonna press F2 and rename this map. And then we're gonna make sure that we go up here and set this to loop. That way it won't disappear after the first frame. After that, we're gonna be using the 3D space, right? So we're gonna have to set this up in a 3D space. So layer, although we're not gonna change these, it's probably a good idea to just rename these so that we can know which one is which one. After we have this map right here, we can actually set the render node already here, and we're not gonna really use this part for now. Then we're gonna need to create another layer for whichever elements we're gonna add, right? So I'm gonna add, let's say, these castle right here, and I'm gonna also loop these, and I'm gonna rename these. Then we're gonna set these up with a merge node in the 3D space, and we're gonna press 2 so we can see these in the 3D space. If you haven't liked this video yet, make sure to like this video, because that is the only way that YouTube will know that people are enjoying it. Also, make sure to leave a comment. That way more people, it gets more engagement, right? And that way the YouTube's doesn't stop showing it to people. Here is what we're gonna be working with, right? So everything is flat right now. And then to position our layer, we're gonna have to go to this one, which is the 3D layer for the castle. And we're gonna make these smaller like these. And I'm gonna have to rotate these on the 3D space. So we're gonna use the axis. We're gonna set this to a 90-degree rotation. We're gonna move these holding Alt so that I can rotate our camera on our viewer right here. And I'm gonna hold Control when I wanna zoom in and out. Then I can actually use these controls like that. And then I'm gonna bring these forward a little bit so that's right on top of the map, like that. Well, that's a little bit too much. It's a little bit hard to move around the map, right? So when you hold Alt. Okay, we're good there. I'm gonna set this up to be a little bit smaller again. And since the pivot point was right in the center, when I made this smaller, it had to be readjusted again. Okay, so now after you have the map in the position that you want, a cool trick or tip is so that you don't accidentally move these, is to right click here on the Z axis, and then we're gonna set these to be an expression. What that does is it basically just locks these green ones so we cannot move these anymore, so you won't be moving these by accident. And we're gonna still be able to move these around like that if you want. Okay, now do the same process for the other part, which would be the statue right here that we have, Statue of Liberty. Let's change this, and I'm gonna add we can actually just copy this one and then paste these, and then I'm going to rename these like that. And since I already locked the transform node, the only reason that we're not seeing it is because we have to move these around. Might be a little bit too small because the image was different, right? So, okay. One thing that happened here was that I forgot to actually loop this one. So if you don't loop it, you're not gonna be able to see it. Okay, now that you have these in place, you can go ahead and adjust the position of the Statue of Liberty that we have here. And I'm gonna make these a little bit smaller or bigger, I guess. Okay, I think that's good. It's definitely a little bit of like a hard movement to it's a little bit hard to navigate around here. But one thing that I found was that if you rotate this merge node to be -90 degrees, for some reason, zooming in like these, it's a little bit easier to move sometimes. Like it doesn't get as bugged as if you were like doing it in the vertical format, right? But it still is a little bit, it still does require you to move around a little bit and try to find out what the right angle to find your elements is. I'm not sure exactly if there is a way to work around these and fix these maybe, right? But if you know, let me know down in the comments. So yeah, that is basically how you would go about adding elements. Now, a quick interruption. This video is brought to you by my PaperFoldFX and also my split screens toolkit. So if you need either of those things, make sure to check them out on the website. Let me just add one set of clouds right here so that I can tell you how to add them. And then one thing that I did for them was a little animation. Now in this case, the clouds might need to be a little bit different. Like we'll have to change the position of these if they are going under like our map, right? So we can just double click right here or right click and then remove the expression for the time being. Holding Control, we can adjust the position of these. And then you can also adjust the opacity of this layer if you want to make them a little more transparent like that and see through. If you want to have a couple more clouds, what you can do is copy and paste these right here. And we're going to create a merge node. And then I'm going to connect these clouds to that one. Like that. And then I can move these around and set these up whatever I want them to be. If you want to animate the clouds to be sort of floating, you can animate the Y position, not the Y, the Z position in this case. Click right here at frame 0. Go, let's say 48, or let's go to frame 80. Like that. Let's see if it is too much or not. It's a little bit too much. I'm going to have to decrease these. It's floating a little bit. And then on the spline tool, you can select these. And you can keep them linear and then just make sure that you have them ping pong so they are continuously floating like that. Okay, we have all the elements that we want to use in this composition. So the next thing would be to add the shapes that we have. So we're going to have this image of the shape right here. I'm going to rename this shape. And I'm going to loop these. And I am going to create, I'm going to use a copy of this one again, of the castle right here. And I'm going to name these shape 3D. I'm going to connect these here. And then I'm going to connect these to the merge node that we had initially created. You can connect as many things as you want into a 3D merge node. I think there isn't a limit. But in this case, we can connect these all of them there because it's not a big deal. Okay, if you want, let's press 2 on this shape that we have here. Let me fit this on screen again. And the only thing that I want to do here first is we're going to adjust the pivot point that we have here. And I want to make these be a little bit, where is a pivot point? Let me restart the scale and then I'm going to be able to move the pivot point. There it goes. After I set this pivot point to be at the bottom of our shape, then it's going to be easier to like adjust the position of it and the size of it according to the map. Because if I make these, whoops, where is this? The shape 3D. Because then I can actually just restart these. Actually, that's in the correct space. So I'm going to leave the expression on. but then I can make the ship smaller like that, and it won't go through the map that we have here. In this case, we're gonna only use the X and Y to animate our ship, and also we're gonna rotate our ship on its Z value right here to animate the rotation or supposed rotation of the ship. So I'm gonna get a little bit closer to the initial point, which is that one. And then I'm gonna animate the ship moving from these, or like sailing from these castle right here into the other part of our map. So first I'm gonna create a X and Y keyframe and also a Z keyframe. I'm gonna go, let's say, to frame 80, and then I can move these around like that. That will create a 3D path, right? And then I'm gonna leave a little pause right here, just so that they have like a little bit of a break, or there was storm, I don't know. And there's a little bit of movement there. And then after that, I'm gonna make them reach the final destination right here in the statue, which would be New York, I guess. Like that. And then here I'm gonna set these rotation. We're gonna have to rotate these a little bit more. So it's gonna start like that there. Here it's gonna probably change to be a little bit more direct. And then I'm gonna do that. And then move these a little bit again, just so that it has a little bit more movement. Okay, we have the movement of our ship right here. And you can go and use the spline tool if you wanna adjust anything right here. Press F and then ease them in and out if that is the style of animation that you want to make, right? Then we have the pauses right there. But if you don't want that there to be a pause right there, we can actually just press Shift L, and then we'll make that first, and like these pause right here more linear, right? So we have this ease in and out animation here at up to that point, and then there's like a little bit more like a stop. Now, one thing you can also do is press, with these selected, press Shift S. Let me take a look at these. Yeah, the movement looks a lot more smoother if you press Shift S. So let me fit this to screen. And then, so I'm gonna actually do the same for this part right here. We have the movement be a lot smoother because this path is adjusted with the curvature that you make here in the splines. Let's see if I make these. Well, that's not it. Let's see. So if I adjust the spline right here, holding Control, you will see that the path actually moves. So you have this weird move, right? And that is because if you try to adjust the path manually by, let me select this point right here that we have here, the keyframe, it works, but sometimes if you have a lot more elements, it gets bugged out like here, and it's selected the layer of our map right here. Now that let me just try to lock these and see if that actually selects this again, or if just, yeah, it still selects the map or any other element when you click on it. So that is why it's easier to adjust the path by just using this spline right here. But you can always try to select this point, and without, as you see here, it's a little bit hard to move this around, but you can always just click over it already, and then adjusting it like that, it will also make any adjustment to the map, right? These only have, the issue happens when you try to select on these, what do you call these little arrows right here, like the blue one most of the time, right? But if you select this point from the actual keyframe point right here, it allows you to move this around a little bit more easily. All right, so we have our ship animation. Let's take a look. Now let me add these. Should we add the 3D camera first? Okay, now there was one thing that I actually had for the next point, but I'm gonna do this other thing first. The first thing, I'm gonna add that 3D, sort of 3D line that you saw going from one point to the next one. And to create this one was a little bit tricky because it just, for some reason, was weird and did not really work out. So if we go to the other fusion composition that I created, let me show you what it looks like. I'm just gonna bring this here. So we have a polygon right here with a background that then goes into a 3D layer, and the polygon is obviously animated right here, polygon line. And then I use a bender to create that curvature for the line, and then one transform node to move one rotation of the line, and then another one to adjust the position again. So it's a little bit complicated, right? So I thought maybe we could use a 3D shape that is a cylinder to try to adjust that. So I'm going to try to do that in this video. So this is going to be the first time trying that. So hopefully it works. So I'm going to select the merge 3D, and I'm going to move these and connect these here. We can see this huge cylinder. Well, not cylinder yet, because we have to go to the controls here. Well, here on the shape, and then we're going to have to change from plane to cylinder. Now it's pretty big, but we can adjust the radius of these and also the height. And then we can also make these even smaller like that. And that is going to allow us to probably make this process a little bit faster from, what do you call these, than using the polygon one, right? So I'm going to try to adjust them and put these in place. The only thing is that it might be a little bit too tall, right? And that is the thing that it's not probably. Let's see. What if I adjust the scale of these? Oh, there it goes. By adjusting the scale in a non-locked way, that makes it a lot easier to make the line a little bit less circular, I guess you could call this, right? Okay, now I have the rotation. I want to make these a little bit like that. Oh, that's perfect. This method actually works better than using the polygon on a background. Now, the only thing that happens here is that it doesn't look that circular, right? It does have these weird cuts right here, sharpness. So to fix this, what you can do is simply increase the base subdivisions, and that's gonna make these a lot smoother. But this will take a little bit more of a tool on your system probably, so make sure to take that into account. And then to animate these, first we're just gonna have to find where's the initial point of our cylinder. There it goes. And that is what we're gonna do. We're just gonna animate these from this start right here. We're gonna click keyframe. We're gonna go to, let's try to follow the shape. Holding Ctrl, we can see the keyframes of this shape. So I'm gonna make the position of this be like that. Then it's gonna move a little bit more. And then at the end, it's gonna reach the end. So if we take a look at both of them together, we have that great movement of the line. I'm gonna go to the material and change the color right here. So it's a little bit reddish maybe. That's gonna look a little bit cooler. There we have our line animation. Let's see if they don't overlap right here that much. That's good. That's great. Yeah, this method works a lot better. So I'm just gonna do this map line, rename that. And that method worked a lot better than the polygon method, because the polygon method was just a mess and it took a bunch of time to figure out. Okay, now the next part is what will bring these to life. Now, one key thing here is that in Mapal's tutorial, he shared one thing that he did for the camera, or for the 3D camera, to actually work correctly. And the thing is that in After Effects, the camera has the same issue that it has. It's not really an issue. It's the same way it is built, basically the same way that in DaVinci Resolve Fusion, which is that if you use the rotation controls, it will rotate on itself like that, so in its own axis. You can use a target, but that always brings a few issues with the movement because it adjusts automatically, right? So it doesn't give you that much control. So it basically takes a little bit of control from you. So he created a couple of null objects for these to work in After Effects. And similarly, in DaVinci Resolve, we can create a transform 3D node, which will act as our null object, basically. So first of all, we're gonna zoom the camera out so that we can see these on our screen. And I actually set this up to have two screens, right? So I'll click here and then you will have two screens. I press 1 on the merge node so we can see these here, and I press 2 on the renderer that we have here. Now, on the camera itself, we have the camera, and we're gonna use the Z here to zoom in and zoom out, and we're gonna be adjusting a few things as well. So we're gonna right click here on the transform node because we want our camera to sort of follow our ship. We're gonna right click here and then connect these to our ship X offset, and we're gonna do the same for the Y offset. Now there's one weird thing that happens when we do that, which is that it's not really like the path that we have right here is not really the same one, because it gets offset for some reason, right? So the camera is not really in the correct place. So what we could do here first is we're gonna try to adjust the Y value and see if when we zoom in right here, now we have the ship in the center. There it goes. So that will be our center value for the camera. Now that is for some reason that just happened right now. I don't think that same thing happened on the previous one. So that is something that we'll have to work through with in this one. Let me check the other fusion composition just in case. If we press 2 here, we have this camera move ship right here. Yes, so in this case, that didn't happen in the previous one. So I'm not sure why that is an issue on this next one that we had just created, right? Sometimes just things can happen, I guess. Okay, so one thing that I think we could do to try to fix this is by adjusting the pivot point. So we're gonna do that, and then maybe that'll fix this. Let's test this out first of all. So to test it out, I'm gonna press 2 on here, make these bigger, like these, and I'm gonna move the camera in, and then I'm gonna press the rotation right here, the X value, and then on the Y value. Yeah, everything is working correctly, I think. Now, our ship is floating in the air right now. That is not what we want. So we're gonna have to fix that by going to the ship and then adjusting the Z value right we have here, remove the expression, and now our ship is on land. We're gonna add the expression again so that we have that locked in. If I press play right now, you can see that our camera is already following the ship, and if we move these around like that, well, not there. If I move the Z value, you can see that it's rotating around the ship right here. So that is basically what we will do. We will animate the rotation of the X, the Z, and also the zoom in of the camera. So we're gonna bring this back to the original position here, and we're gonna bring the camera out so that we have that first initial position for our map. Here we're gonna move these so that our map is centered, maybe a little bit more further away. You can also play around with the camera angles right here on the camera controls. So if you have any idea of how the angles work, you can probably use these. In this case, it's probably not as necessary, but you can play around with this, and you can even animate these at some point if you want to. All right, so we're gonna first create a keyframe for the zoom in. So it's gonna be the Z, and also for the Y, so that it becomes basically 0 and 0 after we get to close to the ship. We're gonna make these to be at frame 30. That's fine, like that. I'm gonna have to set these up to 0 and 0, I think. Maybe. First, I'm gonna animate also the rotation that we have here for the X value. So I'm gonna bring these to 0. That's gonna allow us to see better where our map is located. One thing we wanna do is pin both of these onto the screen so that on your inspector, they are both showing at the same time. So we're gonna move the camera here a little bit higher like that. Maybe set these up to 0. That's gonna bring these to the center. That's good. Our camera position is gonna be there. And I'm gonna adjust the rotation again here a little bit more so that we have the horizon right there. And you can also adjust the zoom in of the camera as well a little bit more. Basically like that. I think that's good. Here, let's take a look. We have our camera zooming into our ship. Now we're gonna leave the time, we're gonna follow the ship for a little bit. But in this case, I'm gonna create the Z keyframe right here for the rotation of our ship. And we already have these keyframes right here. I'm gonna move a few frames like that. And now I'm gonna rotate these a little bit, just a little bit. So we have some sort of movement in this at this point. And then after this one, I'm also gonna create a keyframe for the Z and the Y here. And then I'm gonna also create a keyframe for the X, just in case I wanna animate the X. Now I'm gonna go, let's say 35 more frames here. And I'm gonna rotate these so that we have the other view of our ship, like that. But I also wanna add a little bit more movement, maybe make these like that, a little bit flatter, and also just the height, and zoom in a little bit more. When you zoom in like that, you'll see that these gets cut out like that. So that's why you have to adjust this Y value right here. Let's take a look at these. I have the rotation. I'm gonna wait here for a little bit and rotate these a little bit more like that. And then we're gonna go a few frames forward again. Let's actually make these 35 again. I'm gonna bring these to 360-ish, something like that maybe. And then I'm gonna zoom out. Do we have a previous keyframe here on these points? Yeah, here you have to make sure that you create another keyframe before we go back to normal. Just that otherwise it's gonna grab that other point and you'll see those other movements in here in this section right here. Okay, now we're back in place. Rotate these a little bit more like that. Zoom out a little bit, and we can adjust the Y value if you want a little bit too. I want to be able to see that red line that we have here. So maybe that's why you have to adjust this a little bit more like that. Okay, and then we have our movement here, and the last part of the movement after this whole thing is back to normal. I want the movement to keep rotating a little bit until we get to the final destination. And for that, I'm going to use the Z value right here again, like that. And then that's going to be the movement. Now we have to select both of these, and on the spline tool, we're going to be able to make the camera movement a little bit more impactful and more interesting. So you can always select everything and press Shift S and then see how that looks. I have the weird zoom out, right? I think that might be because I missed another keyframe for the Z of the camera. Let's see. Now this part right here looks fine already. If you want, you can select these points. What happened? Now everything was linear right there. Let's see. Shift L in here. I don't like that zoom out that's happening right there. So I'm going to Shift S this part. Then from these points right here, I'm going to select these 2 points. I'm going to press F, and then I'm going to press T and adjust the curvature like that. So there's a little bit more of like an ease in and out of that. And then I'm going to do the same thing for these points right here. But on this one, I'm going to have to press Shift S so that the movement is a little bit more, so that it continues basically. It's not as impactful, so I'm going to press T and try to adjust things like that. Let's see. Here we have the movement. No, that's the Z rotation. Let me see. Yeah, the Z rotation, and I want these to be actually linear. I'm gonna have to hold Control and adjust these manually like that. So we have the camera movement right there. And we have our cool map animation ready. Now you can always add more elements here and adjust things as you want. If I want to make this statue here a little bit bigger, maybe I can actually make these like that. And I'm going to have to lower the pivot point of these. Whoop, the Z value. Like that. There you have it. And if you want to add, let's say in the example that you saw, I had this shape, right? I had a second shape. If you want to add a second shape, what you can do is, where is this? Right here. What I did was actually I just created a copy of this layer, connect this to the shape 3D layer, and I have now two shapes right here. But I want to offset these a little bit. You can offset these by moving the actual points that we have here, maybe like that. Make these a little bit further away, maybe. And if you press play, you will see two shapes already, but we need to adjust the initial point. See, they are both at the same time going, basically, right? Now, what you can do here is select all of these points and offset these a little bit to the right, like holding shift. So that's gonna allow a little bit of like a delay time on the second shape, like that. It's just gonna add a little bit of an effect for the realism, I guess, right? So it's not just both ships going at the same exact speed, right? So we have both of them like that. One reaches first and the other one second, obviously. And that is basically the map animation. For the background that you saw, that rotating, what do we call that? Dang it, I can't remember the name of it. It's not a clock, it's a forgot the name. I'm just gonna put that. I can't think of it right now. I make sure to loop these and I connect these to the background. And then I actually mask this out with an ellipse. So I'm gonna add an ellipse right here. This is weird. It's not supposed to do that, right? So we're gonna play back in the timeline full. That should fix it. I'm not sure why that's happening. Usually they won't be like that. So let's size these, resize. And it's supposed to be a 1080 by 1080, I guess. There we go. We have a 1080 by 1080. Now I can add an ellipse right here and I make these like that. And we have, it's not perfect, but that should work. After the camera is already animated, you can actually just unpin these so that it doesn't bother you when you move and work on other things. Then I'm gonna press transform right here, or add a transform node, and I'm just gonna make these bigger. So to see these on the as a final result, right? I'm just gonna make these bigger like that. It's always gonna look like that. And you can also make these background be, let's try to make these a little bit color like that. You can also add some sort of texture here in the background if you want. What I also did was I added a blur right here and try to make these a little bit blurry like that, so it's not completely noticeable, right? So it looks a little, so it adds a little bit more of a depth of field. And I animated a normal rotation on these. So the angle, and I'm gonna make these spin like that. So it's gonna be just a subtle movement. It shouldn't be that much, otherwise it's gonna take a little bit of attention from the main subject that you're working with. Now there's one thing that I also added on this map right here. You can see the edge right here, it's a little bit too sharp. So if you want to soften that, what I did was press 2 on the map that we have. I added a rectangle, set the size to 1 and 1 so that it fills completely, and then simply adjust the soft edge. So we have a little bit of like a, not blur, but sort of like a less sharp cut of our object. Now if I press 2, we can see that the map is not completely, it doesn't completely have a sharp cut right there. So it sort of fades out a little bit. That is just like an optional step. Now, if you want to add a few extra stuff like other clouds and stuff, you can follow the same process. Feel free to play around with that. But if you want to add some sort of stop motion effect, add a stop motion node. That's gonna make the effect a little bit more interesting as well. Let's see, 3 frames. And then one thing you can do is add a grain node. Play with either or until you find one that you like. Let me just set these up to be one screen. Where is it? Whoop. one screen right here. Without the gray node, just looks like that. With the gray node, it looks a little bit more interesting, right? It's just an interesting effect to add on to it. So yeah, you can play around with the stop motion node if you want to add that so that it looks a little bit more interesting. Also the gray node, and just add as many things as you want and as much as your system can handle, I guess you could say, right? And then we have our map animation right there. I try to take these slow. I try to make these videos sort of like slowed in so that you can clearly understand everything that's going on, right? If I were to jump through and try to make these a 10-minute video, I would probably skip through a bunch of stuff that it's probably good to know and important to know, right? That's why these videos are a little bit longer than usual. So we have the cool map animation right here. So yeah, I bit my tongue, dang it. Okay, so yeah, make sure to give a like if you haven't yet. And if you want to download the project files, I made them available for the members of the SUALVI Club. So if you're not a SUALVI Club member, then maybe consider joining the club, maybe even for 1 month. So if not, then you will have to find them on your own and also download them from stock websites or anywhere you find your assets. So I'd love to see if you try this out. And if you do, you can leave the link to your video in the comments of this one so we all can check out your project and what you came up with. That is it for this video. I'll see you in the next one here in SUALVI. Bye.